When did you realize your life's work was being stolen while you were still employed? I just watched Robert Garcia, 27M, walk into my boss' office, close the door, and then heard Angela Parker, 83F, the literal matriarch of this whole damn company, start cackling, and I swear to God, I felt my heart rate hit 180 and my hands started shaking so bad I almost dropped my iPhone 14 right into my leftover Panera mac and cheese. I'm Austin Kelly, 56M, and I'm sitting here at my desk at 11:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, trying to look busy, but honestly, I'm typing this from my MacBook Pro, hiding it behind a stack of invoices because I cannot deal with the reality that I've been actively, methodically edged out of my job after 30 years, and now the final knife twist is happening. Like, I don't even know where to start with this. The whole thing feels like a slow-motion corporate drowning. I run the R&D division of this family-owned metal fabrication business. When I say family-owned, I mean it's the Parker clan, and I am just the guy who built their patent portfolio from 0 to 12 while they were busy arguing about who got the Christmas bonus SUV. My job title is Senior Director, but realistically, I was the one keeping the lights on. I've had trust issues since forever, which you'd think would make me better at spotting betrayal. But in GL, when it's this insidious, this passive-aggressive, you start questioning your own sanity. And trust me, they made sure I questioned my sanity every single day for the last 8 months. This all started accelerating about 6 months ago, right after we finalized the design for the new high-efficiency coil, the thing I had literally spent 2 years, 8 months of my life developing. This wasn't just a product, it was the entire future of the company, projected to boost revenue by 40%. The board presentation for the launch was set for last Friday and I was primed. I knew every spec, every stress test, every projection. I lived and breathed that coil. Enter Robert Garcia, 27M. He joined the company 8 months ago as a digital strategy coordinator, which sounded important but basically meant he knew how to make pivot tables in Excel and had a TikTok account. He's the nephew of a major family friend, so he was immediately fast-tracked, which, okay, fine, nepotism is the lifeblood of this place. But Robert, bless his little heart, has the audacity of a hungry squirrel. Initially, he was helpful, too helpful. He started assisting me with the presentation decks. I'm 56, I know how to use PowerPoint, but the truth is, my aesthetic sense peaks at Arial 12. Robert was all about sleek infographics, animations, and making the data pop. He was using brand names like Adobe Creative Cloud and Figma like they were everyday words, and I was just grateful not to be wrestling with bullet points anymore. I was so swamped with the final stress testing and production line prep that I was relying heavily on him for the visuals. He'd sit in my office, the office on the 5th floor overlooking Main Street, the one I earned through 30 years of late nights, and he'd tap away on his Samsung Galaxy laptop, looking earnest. The first little crack in my trust happened about 3 months ago. We were meeting with the manufacturing VP, and I mentioned a specific calculation method I used for material density. Robert cut me off, holding up his hands and saying, "Oh, Austin just provides the baseline data. I developed the predictive modeling algorithm that makes those density calculations feasible." I remember feeling that cold drop in my stomach. I gave him a weak, strained smile and said, "Robert, that's just a standard linear regression model we've been using for years. You just put it into a prettier interface." He didn't even blink. He just looked at the VP and said, "It's all about presentation, isn't it?" I dismissed it. I chalked it up to young guy hubris. Honestly, and I know, red flag, I was just relieved the VP seemed impressed regardless of who he thought did the work. Past me was such an idiot, but the weirdness escalated. I started noticing small things missing from my desk. Specific technical notes, not general ones. I'm a pen and paper guy for the really critical stuff. I found that my locked cabinet, where I kept the physical prototypes in my master design notebook, the one with the actual formulas and the timeline of my breakthroughs, felt disturbed sometimes. I even started setting up little traps, a specific pen placed sideways, a piece of scotch tape over the latch, and I'd come in the next morning and the pen would be upright, the tape gone. I started getting paranoid. I even checked the Ring doorbell footage on my home account one night just to see if I was losing it because I couldn't afford to lose my focus. I was so stressed my sleep schedule was wrecked. I'd wake up at 4 a.m. wired, heart racing, thinking about the $1,247 rent I had to pay, the $347 electric bill, and the fact that I only had 14 PTO hours left. Then came Angela Parker, 83F. Angela is the ancient, terrifying face of the Parker family. She still wears tailored wool suits that smell faintly of mothballs and judgment. She runs the foundation side of the business but still weighs in on everything. Angela is also unbelievably fatphobic. She looks at anyone over a certain BMI like they just personally ruined her day. She always looks at me with an expression that says, "You're a 56 and still breathing my air." About 2 months ago, Angela called me into her office. He didn't look up from her desk where she was examining a piece of antique lace. "Austin," she rasped, her voice like grinding gravel. "You look tired, stressed. Have you been taking care of yourself?" I wanted to say, "No, Angela, I've been stress eating Teleni gelato and working 70-hour weeks trying to ensure your great-grandkids can afford beachfront property." I just said, "I'm fine, Angela, just focused on the launch." She finally looked up, fixing me with this incredibly cold stare. "Robert has been expressing concern about your energy levels. He says the technical side is sound, but the delivery has been lackluster." Robert is 27 and doesn't know the difference between stress, fatigue, and incompetence. I snapped back, which I know, stupid move. Angela leaned forward, her elbows on the mahogany desk. "Robert brings youth, a spark, something innovative. I've asked him to take point on the final presentation structure. You will provide the technical backup, of course. We need to ensure maximum impact for the board." That was the first official demotion, not a title change, but a clear removal of control over my own creation. I walked out of that office and went straight to the coffee shop on Main Street and ordered a triple shot espresso because I literally needed CPR. I was shaking so bad I almost spilled the coffee. I should have left then. But the golden handcuffs are real, guys. I've got a pension tied up here, I told myself. It's just the presentation. I still have the patents. I still have the technical knowledge. I started trying to reassert control. I tried scheduling meetings with Robert to go over my data. He was suddenly impossible to pin down. He'd text things like, "So busy today, 8 Zoom meetings back to back, Teams messages are off, can we TLKA later?" Yes, he actually typed TLK. I even called him 27 times in 1 hour one afternoon because I needed the finalized yield data before I could sign off on the QA reports. He let every single one go to voicemail. He later texted me at 5:30 p.m. "Sorry man, iPhone battery was dying 3% and I had to deal with an unreasonable customer." Talk in the AM. Unreasonable customer. That's where Randy Rodriguez, 44M, comes into play. Randy is Angela's estranged nephew. He was the golden boy of the company until about 7 years ago when he had a massive falling out with Angela over some shady real estate deal, and he was effectively exiled, though he still holds a minority share and sometimes pops back up like a bad cold. He's always been a decent guy, if a little manic, and we used to commiserate over the Parker family absurdity. A few weeks ago, I ran into Randy at Costco. I was pushing a cart full of necessities, a 48-pack of toilet paper, a rotisserie chicken, and the required giant tub of Ben & Jerry's. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Austin," he whisper-yelled, pulling me into the freezer aisle. "You look like hell. What's going on at the factory? I heard Robert Garcia is running around like he owns the place." I told him everything. The stolen credit, the demotion, Angela's passive-aggressive digs about my weight. She kept subtly leaving pamphlets for a natural colon cleanse on my chair. Randy listened, chewing the inside of his cheek. "That kid is bad news, Austin. Total snake. He was trying to get funding for a totally bogus startup 2 years ago, claiming he invented some kind of social media aggregator. Pure fraud," I warned Angela. "Angela probably didn't listen," I said, grabbing a bag of frozen vegetables. "She didn't," Randy confirmed. "But here's the thing, that coil design, I got a few contacts. A few questions were raised last week at a supplier conference. They were talking about Garcia's breakthrough with the efficiency ratings." My jaw literally dropped, like cartoon character jaw drop. "What, Randy? That's mine. I have the dated notes. I have the CAD files." "I know you do," Randy said, pulling out his beat-up Toyota Corolla keys. "But he's been talking to suppliers, not just internally. He's claiming the IP." He paused. "Austin, I think they're setting you up for constructive dismissal." The term hit me like a physical blow. Constructive dismissal, creating such a hostile or unbearable work environment that the employee is forced to quit, therefore forfeiting unemployment and severance. My chest tightened immediately. I couldn't breathe. I stumbled back against the freezer case, suddenly feeling incredibly nauseous. "No," I whispered. "No, they wouldn't, not after 30 years. "They would," Randy said, voice low and dark. "Angela is ruthless. And if Robert can steal the credit for the coil, she can claim you were incompetent, let go of a highly paid older employee, and bring in a cheap kid who runs the company on TikTok trends. You need proof, Austin. Solid proof that Robert is presenting your work as his own. Find your original documentation." That night, I didn't sleep at all. I was wired but exhausted. I got up at 3:30 a.m. and drove back to the office using my key card, which thankfully hadn't been deactivated yet. I went straight to my office to the locked cabinet. I unlocked it, my hands shaking. The design notebook was there. I flipped through the pages to the section detailing the fluid dynamics equations, the real proprietary stuff, and that's when I saw it. The entire section, 4 pages of dense, handwritten math and diagrams, was gone, cleanly torn out. I felt the blood drain from my face. My knees felt weak. I wanted to throw up, but I was so dizzy my vision was blurry. The rage I felt was volcanic. I wanted to key Robert's expensive BMW he can't afford, which is always parked in my reserved spot. I checked my computer. Every single CAD file I had worked on had been renamed or moved into a folder labeled Archive AKELLY. The most current cleaned up versions were all dated with today's date, and the author field listed R. Garcia. It wasn't just stealing credit, it was a full takeover. I walked into work this morning, Tuesday, completely numb but raging. I grabbed a gas station coffee and sat at my desk, meticulously printing out all the email exchanges where Robert had acknowledged getting the technical framework from me. It felt pathetic, a paper shield against a corporate wrecking ball. The board presentation, the official launch of my coil, is happening in 2 days, Thursday. This morning, I got a calendar notification for a mandatory meeting with HR and Angela scheduled for 3:00 p.m. today. A meeting with HR and Angela never means good things. It usually means severance is being discussed, or in my current scenario, dismissal without cause, or worse, dismissal for cause incompetence. I looked at the clock, 11:45 a.m. I was just trying to survive until 3 p.m. I even called my best friend Jess, 56F, who told me, "Girl, what the fuck, don't sign anything, I'm coming over right now, I'll sneak in through the parking garage." Then just 2 minutes ago, that dramatic moment I mentioned at the start happened. Robert Garcia, 27M, walked past my desk looking annoyingly smug in a perfectly tailored suit. He walked into Angela Parker's 83F office. I could hear their voices, muffled but clear enough through the partially closed door. Robert, sounding incredibly polished. "And the final pitch deck is flawless, Angela. I've ensured all references to past archive staff have been removed. This presentation positions the coil as purely an internal R&D success driven by the new digital strategy team." Angela's rasping voice, "Good, Robert, we need a clean slate, and we need to move on this quickly. We can't have Austin causing any trouble before the board meeting, especially not with Randy sniffing around." And then I heard it, the sound that literally makes me want to scream and cry simultaneously. Angela Parker started cackling. Not a refined elderly laugh, but a loud, dry, villainous cackle. They're setting me up right now. They're planning my 3:00 p.m. termination. I pushed back my chair, my heart pounding so hard I could feel the pulse in my eyeballs. I need proof. I need those missing pages. I need to know what they're doing with the IP. I got up, grabbed my worn leather briefcase, the one my wife bought me 10 years ago for my promotion, and walked straight toward Angela's office. My legs felt like jelly, but the rage was fueling me. I was about 3 steps from the door, planning my grand, furious entrance, when I saw something on the corner of Robert's desk, which is located just outside Angela's door. It was his Samsung Galaxy laptop, open and displaying a complicated file directory. He was so arrogant he hadn't locked his screen. And then I noticed a specific file name in bold font, highlighted blue. Custody agreement. What in the hell? This is a metal fabrication company, not a divorce court. What custody? Who's getting custody of what? My mind instantly flashed to Randy Rodriguez, 44M, earlier warning about the IP and the need for proof. My trust issues flared up, telling me this was the moment. Forget the confrontation, I need to know what this custody agreement is. I stopped dead, pretending to tie my shoe, leaning close enough to Robert's desk. I saw a quick flash of the document preview. It mentioned intellectual property ownership, usage rights, and a non-compete clause. They weren't planning on just firing me. They were planning on formalizing the IP theft through some pseudo-legal document designed to scare me into silence and ensure I never touch this technology again. They were trying to force me to sign away my professional legacy. I quickly glanced at the closed office door. Angela and Robert were still murmuring inside. I took a deep breath, hands clammy. I need those design notes. I need to know what's in that file. I looked down at Robert's open laptop screen, then back at the closed office door, and then I saw, tucked under the edge of Robert's keyboard, a thin stack of papers. They were slightly curled, and one of them had a distinct handwritten diagram of a flow meter I recognized instantly. My missing pages, they were right there, the proof. I know I have less than 30 seconds before they emerge for lunch or whatever. I know I should just wait for 3 p.m. and handle it legally, but I can't. This is 30 years of my life. My heart is absolutely hammering against my ribs. I can feel the sweat beating on my forehead. I need to grab those pages and at least get a picture of that custody agreement. I straightened up, trying to look casual, and took one step toward Robert's desk, reaching out my hand when the office door handle started to turn. The metallic click was the loudest sound I have ever heard. I froze, my hand hovering inches from the crucial documents. They were coming out. I have to decide right now. Grab the pages and get caught red-handed, or run back to my desk and face the termination meeting later empty-handed. I looked directly at the crack of the opening door, expecting to see Angela's judgmental face, when a deep voice I hadn't heard in years boomed from inside the office, completely unexpectedly, cutting off Robert mid-sentence. Angela, honey, you look magnificent. But we need to talk about my percentage of the coil's net profit before you start signing away other people's livelihoods. It was Randy Rodriguez. Randy was in the room, and he just bought me exactly 3 seconds. I plunged my hand forward. I snatched the loose pages off Robert's desk, shoved them into my briefcase, and without thinking, blindly hit a button on Robert's open laptop. My only thought was to get away. I turned and practically ran the 5 steps back to my office, slamming the door shut. I locked it immediately and dove under my desk, tearing open my briefcase. I pulled out the pages. Yes, my handwriting, my formulas, proof. I simultaneously pulled out my iPhone 14, heart racing, and opened the voice recorder app, knowing I need to capture whatever the hell is about to happen in that office. I can hear the voices through the ventilation, louder now, shouting. Randy and Angela are going at it. Robert is shrieking something about proprietary information. I need to make sure I have solid evidence before they realize I have the original IP back. I need to get this voice recording, and I need to figure out what that custody agreement is really about. Suddenly I hear a new voice, a panicked gasp right outside my door, and a furious hammering on the wood. Austin, open the door. What did you do to my laptop? You better not have touched anything. Austin. It was Robert. He knew I was there. He must have seen me grab the papers in his peripheral vision, or maybe my panic move on his keyboard did something obvious. The hammering intensified. I know you're in there. If you don't open this door, I am calling security and telling them you stole company property. My phone, currently recording the explosive fight between Randy, Angela, and Robert in the next room, flashed with a notification. It was a Zelle transaction receipt for $2,500 sent 3 minutes ago. The sender, R. Garcia. The recipient, R. Rodriguez. Wait, Robert and Randy, the estranged nephew who warned me about the coil theft and the guy who actually stole it. Why is Robert zelling Randy $2,500 right now? The hammering on the door gets frantic. Robert is practically kicking the wood. Austin, you are fired, effective immediately. Open this door and give me back those notes. I gripped the phone, staring at the Zelle transaction and the file name custody agreement. The truth of the conspiracy, whatever it is clearly much, much deeper than I ever imagined. The whole math isn't mathing. I need to survive this 3 p.m. meeting, which is now apparently a 12 p.m. confrontation. And I need to know what Randy and Robert are really doing. I'm literally shaking, sitting here under my desk, clutching 30 years of my life in a handful of paper, listening to a 27-year-old scream about me being fired. I don't move. I don't answer. I just hit save on the voice recording. And then I realize I still have Robert's open laptop screen on my mind. What was the button I blindly hit when I ran? I looked down at the pages I recovered, and on the bottom of the last page there is a small, unfamiliar logo. Randy Rodriguez's old startup name. The fraud startup Randy said Robert tried to pitch 2 years ago. My stomach drops for the 5th time today. This is not just a stolen credit. This is something much bigger. Robert bangs on the door one last time, sounding defeated and panicked. "You will regret this, Austin. You just handed me the legal grounds to claim all of it. This changes everything." And then I hear his footsteps retreating quickly. I'm sitting here heart racing, wondering what in God's name I just stumbled into and what everything he thinks he changed. I'm dying to know what is in that custody agreement and what Randy's endgame is. I think I just became the involuntary witness to an attempted hostile family corporate takeover, and I'm holding the smoking gun. Y'all are not going to believe what happened next. I'm Austin Kelly, 56M, and I am still hiding under my desk at 12:07 p.m. on a Tuesday, clutching the evidence that could either save my career or land me in jail for corporate espionage, depending on who you ask. I saved the voice recording. I checked the recovered notes one more time, 4 pages, my handwriting, my formulas, and Randy Rodriguez's 44M, old, pathetic startup logo at the bottom. The pieces were starting to fit together in the most horrible, dizzying way. Robert Garcia, 27M, just screamed at my door that he was calling security and that I had handed him the legal grounds to claim everything. I'm staring at a Zelle receipt for $2,500 from R. Garcia to R. Rodriguez, the unreasonable customer Robert mentioned last week. I'm betting my last $500 on the fact that the unreasonable customer was Randy. They weren't fighting for opposite sides. They were fighting over who got the biggest slice of the pie they were stealing from me. The whole Randy the sympathetic exiled nephew routine was an elaborate setup to get me to lower my guard and provide information. Randy, the guy who warned me about Robert, was actually colluding with Robert. They were playing corporate good cop, bad cop. The falling out with Angela Parker, 83F, was likely orchestrated or exaggerated to ensure Randy had enough space to operate without immediate suspicion. I felt physically ill. My trust issues, which were already a chronic condition, just turned acute. 30 years, guys. 30 years building this company, and I get taken down by a 27-year-old with a Samsung laptop and a 44-year-old estranged nephew who I thought was my friend. I finally crawled out from under the desk, my knees protesting loudly. I needed to move, but I couldn't walk into the hallway. I checked the door peephole. Empty, silence in the main office area. The shouting must have stopped. I opened the voice memo I just saved and listened closely, keeping the volume low. The recording started mid-fight. Angela rasping, furious. "Not Randy. Your share of the foundation's profits is capped at 0.5%. You agreed to that 7 years ago." Randy shouting, "That was before the high-efficiency coil, Aunt Angela. That was before my digital strategy team member secured the IP. The coil is worth 40% of revenue. I want 5% of the IP royalties, or I expose the whole arrangement to the board before the Thursday vote." Robert high-pitched shriek, "Randy, we had a deal. You get the $2,500 retainer and you push the paperwork through. You don't get involved in the IP split." That was my presentation. Randy, calmer, manipulative. "Austin Kelly was the only leverage we had, Robert. Without him gone, it looks clean. But now he's hiding under his desk and I need hazard pay. The IP split is the only way I ensure I don't get cut out once the board approves your presentation." Angela, ice cold, "Austin is an inconvenience. Robert and I will handle him at 3 p.m. You will not threaten me, Randy. Your mother will hear about this." Robert panicked, then a muffled movement. "Wait, where are my notes? My laptop is still open. What the hell? Austin." The recording ended shortly after with the sound of running footsteps and Robert slamming the door on his way out. Okay, so I was right. Robert and Randy were working together. Randy was supposed to be the customer who facilitated the IP transfer, likely using his old business connections and minority shares to give Robert stolen data legitimacy outside the company, ensuring the board accepted Robert as the sole inventor. The $2,500 was a retainer. Randy's job was to push the paperwork through, which I bet meant getting the board to approve Robert's authorship and signing off on that custody agreement. And that agreement. It wasn't about divorce, it was about IP ownership. They were trying to get me to sign away all future rights to the coil and any related patents, effectively handing them a clean slate and ensuring I could never sue or compete. Robert's final panicked line, "You just handed me the legal grounds to claim all of it. This changes everything," was terrifying. He clearly thought me taking the notes back was proof of theft on my part. I stole my own work. Corporate logic is weird, guys. I knew I couldn't wait until 3 p.m. Waiting for the scheduled HR meeting with Angela would be walking into a legal trap designed to sever me with zero recourse. I needed help. Immediately, I texted Jess 56F, my best friend who was apparently still circling the parking garage. Code red, "Do not come in. They are colluding. Need lawyer now. Call me on the main line. Urgent." My phone rang instantly. "Austin, what the hell is going on?" I heard screaming. "Are you okay? Did that old bish touch you?" Jess' voice was full of controlled fury. "Jess, listen, I got the notes back, but Robert and Randy are working together. They were planning to force me into signing a custody agreement that steals my IP. Robert knows I have the original formulas now. He's going to claim I stole them. I need a lawyer and I need to file a formal IP claim before the board votes on Thursday." Okay, breathe. "I have a friend, Sarah, who specializes in employment law and IP disputes. She's a shark. I'm texting you her number now. Call her right away. Use the company landline if you're worried about them tracking your cell." I immediately hung up and called Sarah, the IP lawyer, on my office landline. I was shaking, trying to sound competent while simultaneously watching the door. Sarah was phenomenal. I gave her the 60-second version. 30 years employment, demotion, IP theft, recovered notes, recorded conspiracy, Zelle evidence, and the looming board vote on Thursday. "Austin," she said, cutting straight to the chase, "you need 2 things. A temporary restraining order against Robert and Angela regarding the IP usage, and you need to file a whistleblower report. Immediately. The fact that Randy Rodriguez, an existing shareholder, is colluding with an employee to steal the IP and manipulate the board is corporate fraud. The $2,500 Zelle, that's gold. But you have to move before the 3 p.m. meeting. Do not sign anything. Do not attend that meeting. Leave the building now. But if I leave, they'll say I abandoned my post, I argued, thinking about the unemployment forms. If you attend the meeting, they will force you into signing away your life. Leaving now with the evidence is the only way to protect your position and the IP. Email me every single piece of evidence you have right now, the voice memo, the Zelle screenshot, and the pictures of the recovered notes. I will start the paperwork. I hung up, opened my laptop, and started working like a terrified maniac. I uploaded the voice recording, screenshotted the Zelle transfer, thank God Zelle shows names, and took high-resolution pictures of the 4 recovered pages, focusing heavily on my original dates and that ridiculous little Randy Rodriguez startup logo at the bottom. The logo proved Randy had his hands on the notes, confirming the collaboration. I fired off the email to Sarah. Then I did something reckless. I forwarded the entire evidence package, the audio, the Zelle, the pages, to 2 email addresses. Randy Rodriguez's personal email and the confidential board member's address with the subject line, Urgent, IP Theft and Corporate Fraud RE High Efficiency Coal Project. I added a single sentence, I will not be attending the 3:00 p.m. meeting. My lawyer is preparing formal charges. It was 12:45 p.m. I felt a surge of cold, pure adrenaline. I grabbed my briefcase, put the physical recovered pages inside, they were irreplaceable proof, and walked calmly out of my office past Robert's empty desk and straight towards the elevator. Just as the elevator doors were closing, I saw Angela's office door fly open. Angela, followed by Randy, looked absolutely furious. Angela, in her mothball-scented suit, pointed one ancient, terrifying finger at me. Austin, stop right there, you are making a terrible mistake. Randy just stood there, jaw slack, staring at my briefcase. He knew I had the pages. He knew I knew. I didn't say a word. I just gave Angela a small, polite, professional nod, the kind you give to a vendor you're about to fire, and let the doors close. I got into my beaten-up 2011 Honda Accord, pulled out of the parking garage, and drove straight to Jess's place. I was an emotional wreck, vibrating with residual anger and fear. Update 48 hours later, Thursday. Okay, so I'm typing this from Jess's spare room, which smells faintly of essential oils and determination. I haven't been back to the factory. My key card was deactivated within 30 minutes of me emailing the board. My email account was locked out about an hour after that. Standard procedure for archive staff, I guess. Sarah, the lawyer, moved faster than a striking cobra. By Wednesday morning yesterday, she had filed the formal IP claim, the whistleblower report, and most importantly, secured an emergency temporary injunction preventing the board from voting on the coil's future until the ownership was officially settled. This was huge. It meant Robert's big moment, the Thursday board presentation of my coil, was entirely derailed. Robert started texting me incessantly on Wednesday. I have 47 unread texts. They went from threats, you committed theft, you will regret this, to bizarre, please Austin man, you don't understand the whole picture, Angela is the real enemy, we can fix this, to straight up begging, please just give me the copies of the notes, we can split the proceeds 50-50, just don't tell the board about Randy. I blocked him. I also blocked Randy, who had the gall to call me and leave a voicemail sounding genuinely hurt. Austin, look man, I was trying to help you. Angela was cutting me out. This was the only way to get enough leverage to protect the IP from falling entirely into her hands. Robert was just the dumb conduit. You ruined the leverage. You need to pull the report. No, Randy, you ruined my life for 6 months, lied to my face, and tried to steal my work. You and Robert can choke on the wreckage of your conspiracy. Sarah explained the custody agreement in detail. It was a standard IP transfer document disguised with vague, familial language to make it sound less like a hostile corporate takeover and more like internal restructuring. The key clause was a non-compete for 10 years, preventing me from ever working on similar technology again, and a $10,000 settlement to waive all future claims. For a coil worth millions, $10K is pocket change. The constructive dismissal tactic was brilliant and disgusting. They made my job so unbearable, stole my work, and discredited me so severely that I would want to quit. Then when I quit, they would swoop in, offer the $10K severance disguised as an IP settlement, and I'd be gone, saving them unemployment costs and protecting the theft. By having Randy involved, they created internal tension and plausible deniability. Angela could claim she was merely trying to manage the disputes between Randy and Robert while Austin lacked the managerial skills to handle his team. It was all a tightly managed performance. So what happened on Thursday, the day the board was supposed to meet? Chaos. Absolute glorious chaos. The board received Sarah's injunction early this morning. They immediately launched an internal investigation. Angela, who had apparently spent Wednesday calling every board member demanding they ignore the frivolous lawsuit by a disgruntled former employee, was put on mandatory immediate administrative leave. This morning I woke up to 12 missed calls, 4 frantic texts, and 1 very formal email from the company's official chief legal officer, asking me to schedule an immediate meeting to discuss the misappropriation of intellectual property under the direction of Ms. Parker. The tide had turned. I went from being the incompetent, overweight engineer they were trying to jettison to the key witness in a massive corporate fraud investigation. 3 days later, Sunday, I met with the chief legal officer, Mr. Evans, on Friday. I brought Sarah. Mr. Evans was utterly professional, utterly terrified of a lawsuit, and completely dedicated to damage control. The meeting lasted 6 hours. I presented all my evidence. The original design notebook pages, the Zelle transfer which showed Robert made 5 separate transfers to Randy over the last 2 months, all under $3,000 to avoid IRS scrutiny, totaling $11,000, the voice recording, and the entire timeline of Robert's infiltration. Mr. Evans was visibly sweating. This wasn't just about my coil anymore. This was about the integrity of the board and potential financial fraud involving a shareholder, Randy, and senior management, Angela. We spent a long time discussing the resolution approach, the custody agreement. Sarah was blunt. My client Austin Kelly spent 30 years building this IP. He deserves full recognition and compensation. We are not interested in a settlement to walk away. We are interested in shared ownership and control. Mr. Evans looked confused. Shared ownership, but you were constructively dismissed, Mr. Kelly. We can offer a generous severance and a settlement for the IP. No, I said, finally finding my voice and feeling totally calm. I am not leaving the technology. I built it. They wanted me gone so they could control it. I want the control back, and I want to set the terms for how they use my invention. Sarah explained the concept. We were going to create a new custody agreement. One where I, Austin Kelly, retained 75% ownership of the IP related to the high-efficiency coil, with the company, the Parker family business, retaining a 25% usage license. I would become an independent consultant, running the R&D division remotely, and they would pay me a 10% royalty on every single coil sold. Mr. Evans nearly fainted. Mr. Kelly, that is unprecedented. So is having your company matriarch collude with a 27-year-old digital strategist and an exiled nephew to steal the entire future of the business, I countered. Take the deal, or we let the full evidence, including the Zelle transactions and the audio where Angela admitted to the plan, go straight to the SEC and the media. You have 48 hours. It felt absolutely terrifying to issue an ultimatum to the company I had dedicated my entire life to, but I had Sarah backing me up and I had the proof. They were cornered. A week later, Tuesday, I am currently packing up my office. The Parker family caved. They signed the new custody agreement late yesterday evening. The terms are mind-bogglingly good, honestly. 1. IP ownership. Austin Kelly retains 75% ownership of the high-efficiency coil IP patents P701 through P712. 2. Royalties. I receive 10% of net profits from every coil sold for the next 15 years. 3. Consultancy. I am rehired immediately as senior technical advisor, paid $150 an hour, working 20 hours a week entirely remotely. This means I advise them on R&D, but I never have to set foot in that awful office again. 4. Employment status. My severance package is paid out in full 12-month salary, and I retain full pension and health benefits as if I retired early. 5. Robert Garcia. Robert was immediately terminated for gross misconduct and corporate espionage. The company is actively pursuing legal action against him and Randy to recover damages, naming them as co-conspirators. 6. Angela Parker. Angela officially resigned due to health complications. They paid her off handsomely to ensure she never talks about this, but she's completely off the board and banned from company premises. I am essentially independently wealthy now, guys. That 10% royalty is going to change my life. I can pay my $1,247 rent for the rest of my life just from the first quarter's projections. I went in today to clean out my office. Robert's desk was entirely empty, stripped bare. Angela's office was also vacant, smelling slightly less of mothballs and more of fresh disinfectant. The cleanup crew was working hard to erase the last 8 months of toxicity. As I was packing my personal items, a ridiculous novelty mug, a photo of my late wife, and my worn leather briefcase, I heard a quiet knock on the open door. Standing there was a woman I barely recognized. It was Angela Parker. She looked frail, much smaller than I remembered, and she was wearing a simple dark tracksuit instead of the usual tailored wool suit. "Austin," she said, her voice still gravelly but quieter. "I knew you would be here." I just stopped packing and looked at her. I was ready for the final confrontation. "I signed the agreement, Austin," she continued, wringing her hands slightly. "You won, you and that shark of a lawyer." "It wasn't a win, Angela," I said, putting the photo of my wife securely in the briefcase. "It was just me reclaiming what you stole." She paused, taking a deep, shaky breath, and then she did something completely unexpected. She didn't apologize for the constructive dismissal or the theft or the years of making me miserable. Instead, she brought up the fatphobic comments. "Robert, he kept implying that your physical state reflected your managerial competency," she admitted, looking down at her hands. "He said you were losing focus because you were losing control of yourself." I believed him, because I always tied physical discipline to professional discipline. It was my mother's teaching. TBH, the fact she was bringing up the weight stuff when she was facing legal ruin showed how deeply ingrained that fat phobia was. "I realized something, Austin, when Randy showed up and Robert and I started arguing about money," she said, looking up, her eyes surprisingly wet. "Randy was using Robert to get at me, to get the money he thought he deserved. Robert was using Randy to steal the credit. Everyone was using everyone, and I was so busy judging your body, I missed the rot right under my nose." It was the closest I was going to get to an admission of guilt, I knew. She was admitting her prejudice blinded her to the actual threats, Randy and Robert, and that her judgment of me was entirely misplaced. "I hope the royalties treat you well," she said, finally turning to leave. "You deserve better than this company, but perhaps now the company deserves better leadership." She walked out slow and steady. That was the last time I saw Angela Parker. The fatphobic tyrant got a moment of self-reflection because her empire crumbled. It was fitting, I guess. The aftermath: 6 months later, I haven't talked to Robert or Randy. Randy is apparently still fighting the company's legal action, claiming he was just trying to expose Robert, which no one believes because of the Zelle receipts. Robert is probably still trying to make pivot tables somewhere. I'm retired but working. I love the consultant gig. I spend Tuesdays and Thursdays reviewing technical specs from my couch, wearing sweatpants and drinking gas station coffee. I charge them $150 an hour and they pay it instantly. The most shocking realization: when I finally got out of that toxic environment, the stress eating stopped. I didn't lose weight because I was focused on my body. I lost weight because I wasn't constantly wired, terrified of losing my livelihood. I'm down 35 pounds not because Angela stopped leaving colon cleanse pamphlets, but because I finally started sleeping through the night. I took some of the royalty money and bought a small cabin in Vermont. It's quiet. I have a fiber internet connection so I can still log into the company's VPN and advise the new very nervous R&D director, a fantastic woman named Sophia. The irony of the custody agreement is perfect. They tried to use that term to control me, but now the document ensures I control the legacy. I have custody of my own creation. My trust issues are still there, TBH. I check my bank account 4 times a day and I still flinch when my phone rings with an unknown number. Sarah, the lawyer, suggested therapy and I finally went. It's expensive but necessary. I'm unpacking 30 years of corporate anxiety and a lifetime of self-doubt. Yesterday I was walking by a window and saw my reflection. I looked good, not just thinner but calmer, more confident. I realized I spent so much time being afraid of the betrayal I almost let it happen. But when the betrayal hit, the fear vanished and pure rage and self-preservation kicked in. I think the biggest lesson here, guys, is that sometimes the corporate enemy is not the one you expect. Randy, the alleged ally, was the true snake. Always document everything. Always get the Zelle receipt. And if someone offers to help you with your PowerPoint because your aesthetic sense peaks at Arial 12, check the file permissions before you walk away. I still have bad days, especially when I think about how close I came to signing that 10-year non-compete for $10,000. But then I look at the royalty statement and I remember I'm getting paid to wear sweatpants and tell a company I once hated exactly how to build their future. It's messy. It's not over, but I survived the corporate drowning. I saved my life's work. And now I am going to go make myself some artisanal coffee and check the stock market, because I can. Will update if I ever see Robert Garcia trying to get funding for a social media aggregator again. I have Sarah on speed dial. Anyway, that's the update. Thanks for sticking with me.